Hello guys, this is me Simo Orahara, and in this video I will be talking about the 5 most creative Zanpakuto in Bleach. So in this list I won't be relying on power as much as I will be relying on criteria such as the ability that distinguishes a Zanpakuto from another, as well as its diversity in terms of techniques both on the Shikai and the Bankai level, and also the form of the Zanpakuto in the release. So the Zanpakuto mentioned in this video may not necessarily fall in those criteria, but the idea is that you can feel that Kobo paid special attention to this Zanpakuto through diving in its nature and techniques.
Senkei Senbon-zakura Kageyoshi.
Perhaps the first thing I would start with when it comes to the Senbon-zakura is Kobo's answer in his interview, which has been included in the book 13 Blades. About the Zanpakuto he has more fun drawing. Kobo's answer was the Senbon-zakura, and the Senbon-zakura was in the second place at the Zanpakuto popularity vote in the book 13 Blades. I surely didn't rely on these informations in order to put the Senbon-zakura in this list, but rather because it is one of the most versatile Zanpakuto in terms of capabilities, and as Kobo said in the same interview, the Senbon-zakura reflects Byakuya's soul, the beauty of his noble spirit portrayed by the sakura leaves, and his power as a noble shinigami. And in terms of techniques, as I said in a previous video about Byakuya, he possesses a nearly perfect Zanpakuto as a defense and offensive. The Senbon-zakura is one of the few Zanpakuto that protects their owner from their abilities through a safe zone. As for the offensive side, we can say that Byakuya developed all his offensive techniques at the Bankai level. And this is why I consider him one of the strongest characters that controls their Bankai by developing it to reach several stages and techniques, from the Senbon-zakura, Kageyoshi Senkei, Hakteiken, Gokei, and the new technique of the Senkei that he used against Girard. These are things that make the Senbon-zakura one of Kobo's most creative Zanpakuto. Toshiro's Zanpakuto release command is one of my favorites, set upon the frozen heaven. The same thing that I said about Byakuya can be said about Toshiro in terms of diversity in the Zanpakuto techniques, and the fact that both their Bankai are an extension of their Shikai. As Toshiro himself said in chapter 548, the only difference between his Shikai and his Bankai is the amount of ice, and he can use some of the same techniques in both Shikai or Bankai. The only thing that Toshiro was struggling was controlling some of those abilities at the Bankai level. So even when Toshiro lost his Bankai, we saw that in his fight against Busby, he used several new techniques. The only difference was in the amount of ice. As for the Bankai, and especially when we talk about the complete form, Toshiro has frankly become on another level of power. His frightening ability of cancelling any ability that crosses his path was so powerful. I mean, to be able to neutralize the ability of Girard's sword, and in the Volt standing form, you must have a tremendous level of Ryatsu. On the other hand, we know that Toshiro's Bankai's weakness is heat. When the old man released his Bankai, we saw how Toshiro's Bankai began to melt. But with Toshiro's adult form and his technique, Shikai Hyokatsu, which relies on freezing the elements of nature, fire, water, earth and wind, can you say that in this form, a fire-natured Zanpakuto wouldn't be a problem for Toshiro? The answer is up to you guys.
Bankai Katen Kyokotsu Karamatsu Shinju.
Being a lover of survival game stories myself, I find Kyuraku's Zanpakuto one of the most mind-blowing Zanpakuto Kobo created. Turning children games into reality and being part of it is terrifying, but the fact that Kyuraku is the master of the games gives him advantage of experience over his opponents, whose mental focus must match his strength in order to survive from such techniques. The natures of Kyuraku's Zanpakuto matches his personality, and I previously posted a video about Kyuraku in which I talked about his personal side, and you can watch that video later. So in his fight against Star, Kyuraku demonstrated 4 games, and in the last arc during his fight against Lily, we saw 2 new games. Then after that, the Bankai, which is based on 4 chapters. But what some of you may not know is that in the novel of Can't Fear Your Own World, Kyuraku showed us another technique or another game, and it's called Yubikiri. This is a game that Kyuraku used against Tokinada, and by that game we knew the real name of the Tsunayashiro's family Zanpakuto. And this game is simply based on the fact that Kyuraku asks his opponent any question, and they must answer without lying. So it's said in the novel that if you lie to each other, your fingers get paralyzed on the first lie, your whole body feels like it's getting crushed by a fist on the second lie, and finally, on the third lie, you feel unimaginable pain as if your viscera were being stabbed from the inside. So seeing a new ability of Kyoraku's Zanpakuto in the novel is a proof that Kyoraku has a lot of techniques and games he only lets out in times of need. It also shows how complicated this Zanpakuto and how much time Kobo invested in introducing these popular games in Bleach through Kyoraku's character. Even though we only saw Ichimonji in a few chapters in the last arc, unlike the rest on this list, however, Ichimonji has a unique ability that made me put it on this list, and the thing that I liked the most about this Zanpakuto is that Kobo didn't focus its power at the edge of the sword, like the sharp of the Senbonzakura or the icy and fiery blows of both Toshiro and Yamaji. It's simply ink. To be able to remove power from anything by striking it with ink, removing its name, and so its power really is a terrifying power. And the more terrifying is that you can remove the name of your opponent and so its full powers and add any power and any name you want. And it was really surprising that Yhwach had no choice but to activate his Almighty to avoid searching that.
Bankai Zanka no Touch.
Oh god, how many times do I have to put the old man in the first place in every classification video I release? If you notice, all the Zanpakuto I mentioned in this list share one point, is that the nature of their Bankai is an extension of their Shikai, and therefore the owner of the Zanpakuto doesn't find it difficult to deal with his Bankai, nor does he struggle in developing techniques from scratch. Instead, he finds himself with enough time to develop and make his Zanpakuto even more creative, and the same goes for the old man Yamaji in his Zanpakuto Ryujinjaka. To already have a strong Zanpakuto 1000 years ago and add another 1000 years of continuous training would only lead to what we saw in the Bankai form. The old man reached a degree of control and new techniques in his Bankai level that made Yhwach himself really doubt that there would be a Zanpakuto that its Bankai would be completely different from its Shikai. And as I said before, the old man's technique at the Bankai level are legendary because their radius is not limited to a specific area but rather includes the whole Soul Society. And I hope to see some techniques of Yamaji he used against Yhwach 1000 years ago and how his Bankai was at that time. Of course, I want to see those things in the anime. So guys, this is my list of the 5 most creative Zanpakuto in Bleach. Of course there are some other Zanpakuto that could be in this list if we talk about the abilities. For example, I like the power of Kira's Zanpakuto Wabisuke or Okitake's Zanpakuto, and in terms of diversity of techniques, we have also Benihime at the Shikai form. Kisuke used during the story several techniques of Benihime, but with that being said, I believe that the most complicated Zanpakuto that ever created by Kobo is Zangetsu. The way its power works and how complicated it is make it truly unique. I didn't put it in this list because I have already made 3 videos about this masterpiece Zanpakuto. So guys, what about you? Do you have other Zanpakuto rather than what I said in this video? Tell me about them in the comment section, and see you guys in my next video that will be about certain category of Bankai.